What's the most terrifying thing you've seen in real life? When I was younger, I kicked a ball over the fence of my dad's friend's house, and naturally I stepped on the fence and poked my head over to see how far it had gone. I saw a man a decent distance away in the backyard, so I called out asking if he could pass my ball back over. But he wasn't responding, so I asked my sister if I was seeing it right. She looked and thought it was a scarecrow. I went to tell my dad and his friend, and they looked at it and called out, but still nothing. They jumped the fence to check it out, and it turned out I was calling out to a man who had hung himself to pass my ball back over. Few cops etc. came. That's about all there is to the story. It wasn't really scary, just creepy. I was pretty young, but it didn't really get to me or anything. I do remember it pretty decently though. Worked as a healthcare security officer in a rather large locked psychiatric ward. One day I was leaving dispatch and happened to catch on our old black and white monitor a man sitting in the middle of the main floor. Something struck me as wrong. Suddenly I saw a black puddle beginning to form under the man. I go running up to the unit, and there sat a man in a puddle of blood. I called for backup, but he stood up and ran at me. I fought this guy for about 5 minutes, both of us covered in blood. His eyes were dead, like a shark's. Turns out he had sat in the floor and ripped out the stitches the ER had put in after a suicide attempt. Edit. Holy shit. I made this comment and totally forgot about it. I too try to respond to the questions as soon as possible. My friend had an aneurysm while taking a leak. He had just smoked weed, and his wife ran to my house next door to get my and my other friend's help. She refused to call the cops because the house smelled like pot. I found him pants down on the bathroom floor and screamed at her that she needed to call 911 now. So, my friend and I dragged him out of the bathroom, shoved some ice down his pants, and I began CPR. First responders in order: EMT, cops, FD. He wouldn't wake up, but he still had a pulse. I was hopeful. Found out only a bit later it was an aneurysm, and he was brain dead when I was giving him CPR, and for months after, his wife kept him on life support and prayed and prayed. They finally took him off, but I heard third or fourth hand because I had transferred to university elsewhere. Halloween night, 2004. Came from seeing a movie at the mall with my 2 teenage sons. We had arrived separately and parked our cars in different sections of the lot. After leaving the movie, I was driving up a ramp and saw peripherally my son's car with the front end smashed in and smoke coming from the front. I quickly U-turned, and as I drove towards them I could see my older son, the driver, 17 years old, standing outside of the passenger door with my younger son, his brother 14 years old, in his arms. The passenger airbag had deployed, so the 14 years old had a nasty scrape on his face from it, but thankfully they were both okay. I hope I never feel fear like that again, ever. Was taking my dog, Yellow Lab, for a walk with my dad when I was maybe 8 years old. We just started to head back to the house, and about halfway there a bear appears in the middle of the street. The bear was standing on its hind legs, standing about 12 feet tall, looking angry as all hell. My dad put me behind his back upon noticing the cub on the side of the road, because he knew this bear wasn't fucking around if it thought its cub was in danger. Next thing I knew, my dog charged at the bear full speed and tackled it down the hill off the side of the road, and me and my dad both thought that was the end of our dog, until about a minute later, we see our dog strolling up the hill without a scratch on her. She wrestled a bear all the way down the hill and won, and most likely saved mine and my dad's life. Damn, I loved that dog. Seeing someone get hit by a car. I was maybe around 10 or so, and I was being driven to the doctor's office for a checkup when we stopped at a stoplight. There was a guy crossing the street to my left who looked down the road and started running across the crosswalk. Next thing I knew, a car drove through the light and slammed into him, launching him straight in the air, whereby he landed on the ground with a loud thud. Looking at him, there was no movement whatsoever. He was just lying there inert on the road. Luckily, we were just down the road from a hospital, and there was a cop right across the street. We drove off from the scene with the woman who hit him in absolute hysterics. The thing that sticks with me the most is the sound of the car hitting him and the oomph he made when it hit. Catching a methed out young woman rummaging through tools in my dad's garage. The face she gave me when she realized a larger male had confronted her in a confined space was one of pure terror, and she was ready to claw my eyes out to survive what she most likely perceived as a threat. When she turned to run out of the garage, my police officer dad caught her by the arm and held her down until the police arrived. Watching her fight, beg, and plead that we won't rape her or kidnap her was pretty heartbreaking when we had the best intentions in mind of getting professionals to handle her drug-infused meltdown. The struggle was strong enough that we decided we should handcuff her to keep her from hurting herself or us. Come to find out later, she was on the run and being chased by police because she thought she was being chased and in danger of being kidnapped inside of a hotel. We were her worst nightmare in her mind, and it sure as hell looked like it. Edit. Thank you for the gold, kind stranger. I was one of the first people to roll up on a car crash that ended up killing 3 people. It was surreal. I was coming over a hill and didn't see the crash happen, but the dust was still settling. I pulled off and immediately ran down into the ditch where one of the cars came to rest. Both of the folks in that car were okay, so I went back up to the road where the driver and passenger of the second car were crawling out of the windows. They both looked to be about 16. When I got closer, I saw 2 girls lying in the road, one clearly DOA and the other gasping for air with a collapsed lung and multiple compound fractures. She was bleeding badly and was by this point surrounded by people trying to keep her awake until EMTs arrived to intubate her. All of that was really shocking, but the scariest part was the behavior of the young driver. I talked to him for a long time to try and keep him calm. The first 5 minutes we talked, he spoke like we had just met under normal circumstances. I asked his name, where he went to school, and he answered normally. Then, every once in a while, he began snapping to reality for a few seconds. His eyes would change, and he would begin to panic, then snap right back out of it and resume making small talk like nothing ever happened. I've seen people in shock before, but never like that. I worked at a gas station when I was 18. One night, at the end of my shift, the graveyard guy just didn't show up. I called my sister to see if she would hang out with me until I could get a hold of someone. At about 4 a.m., an ambulance slowed down right in front of the station. As it came to a stop at the light, the back doors opened up and a guy jumped out. One paramedic hopped out of the back, chasing after him. The guy ran right up to the station, looking terrified. He turned to the left to run again, and we noticed that his head was missing a big chunk in the back, blood all down him. Medic continued to pursue him through the parking lot next door. We called 911 and explained the situation. Dispatch responded. Yeah, right. About 20 minutes later, police arrived to take a statement from us. Guy was high and injured, trying to get away. I don't know if they ever caught up with him again. My mother giving my brother CPR on the beach after he broke his neck and almost drowned. He was in the water for about 4 minutes. Then watching the helicopter take him away, not knowing if he was dead or alive. He defied the odds and went on to live another 36 productive years as a quadriplegic. I was with him when he died a few years ago. Damn, we had some good times. Edit to answer a few questions. He was body surfing at Rehoboth Beach in 1980. There was a major storm, hurricane some miles offshore, which can cause waves to carry one further and break on the shore. He was basically pounded into the sand head first. He went on to graduate high school, college, and some law school. Eventually went into social work advocacy. Was able to work till about 40. Lived till 52. He broke the same vertebrae as Christopher Reeves, but was able to breathe on his own. Diaz told us not to expect him to live past his 20s. I saw a 5-year-old girl fall about 30 feet from a chairlift while skiing. When she landed, I was about 15 feet away. She landed on her stomach. I called ski patrol immediately, but the time it took them to get there felt like an eternity. It was probably not more than 5 minutes. I had no medical training other than very basic, do not move the injured person. Since her face was directly in the snow, I took my jacket off, and I held her neck a head still, and had a nearby person slide my jacket under her face. It was shortly after Christmas, so I tried to distract her by asking her what she got from Santa, and I sang her favorite Christmas song. I kept holding her neck still until ski patrol took over and sent her in the ambulance. Later, I found out that although she had some bad bruising, she walked out of the ER later that day. Edit. The girl had awesome parents. Even though this was the holidays, they contacted a therapist right away, and even got her out skiing just a couple of days later so she wouldn't always have a fear. About 5 years after this happened, I became a member of the National Ski Patrol, which is a volunteer organization that usually patrols at smaller resorts. I saw a car crash as a child. My dad stopped the car to go help. He made me stay in the car, but I saw one body on the ground that started to gain a puddle of blood around it, and another body handing out a window of one of the cars involved in the accident. Blood, glass, and car chunks were everywhere. Horns were honking, heard a lot of screaming. My dad came walking back to the car shortly after he got out. I asked what happened. He said there was nothing he could do, pulled into a parking lot, and waited for cops to come. I remember being impressed by how fast the firefighters cleaned everything up. You would think seeing the bodies would stick with me, but what stuck with me was the pale, dead look on my dad when he came back to me. Sometimes your best intentions can't do anything, and I could tell it got to him. I live in northern BC, Canada, and I was going for a run through some rural roads around my house. I turned a corner and immediately ran into a moose, with her calf behind her. Now for anyone who doesn't know, moose are actually fucking huge, and not scared of humans. They will stomp you to death just because they feel like it, let alone when they are actually protecting their young. In this case, I was literally less than 10 feet away from it. I was lucky in that it just stood its ground and glared at me, never breaking eye contact. So I was able to back away slowly, and cut my run short and go home. If I took one step closer, there is a very real chance it could have attacked and I probably wouldn't be here today. My family used to go camping in Ontario, Canada. When I was 16, I took the small 14-foot fishing boat out fishing before dark, and lost track of time. Huge storm kicked up, we're talking 4-foot waves and hail, and threw the boat into some rocks, and dumped me into a shallow cove on a relatively large peninsula connected by wilderness to the mainland. It was dark and I had no way of contacting anyone. Cell service is a bitch in the wild, so I decided to flip the boat, make a shelter, and hunker down for the night. I woke up sometime during the night to the sound of howling. Loud howling. I turned my flashlight on and scanned the tree line, and saw a wolf snarling at me maybe 20 feet away. I noped the fuck out of there, scrambled under the boat, and spent the night using my fishing pole to dissuade him from digging under the side. I've never seen anything as terrifying as a wolf trying to kill me. My wife giving birth to my daughter when she was only 19 weeks pregnant. Technically it was a miscarriage. My wife's cervix wasn't strong enough and the baby breached something. I didn't listen to the doctor after I understood I wasn't going to be a dad anymore. My wife went through all the stages of labor for about 7 hours after that. My daughter was born only weighing 12 ounces, I believe. I held her, counted her toes and fingers, and saw her heart beating from her chest. I then saw her heart beating no more. I had my hand under her back when I was carrying her, and I would slowly press on it in a rhythm similar to a heartbeat, so I could see her chest rise and pretend she was alive, I guess. The worst day of my life. Edit. Thank you to everybody for the kind words. This happened almost 4 years ago. I still remember it like it happened yesterday, and I cried as I typed it. I now have a healthy 2-year-old daughter, who I'm extremely grateful for. I'm sorry if you too had to go through this. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, and I hope you all are healing your way through this. Snorkeling in Croatia, collecting seashells and shit. Take a deep dive with a rock to get some nice cones from the bottom. Swimming back up. Suddenly, a shadow the size of a SUV passes over me. Look up. Motherfucking shark. I'm terrified as all shit, but already running out of air. So I have to swim up towards it or I drown. Resurface in record time, and trying to climb on my tiny inflatable mattress. Too terrified to climb on the floater, not that it would help, so hang onto it and freeze, with mask submerged so I could see death approaching. All I could think of why nobody told me there are great whites in the Adriatic. The murder fish swims towards me. Okay, this is it. I guess I had a good life, time to say my goodbyes. It passes me by, uninterested. but so close I could count the scars on its belly. It is easily twice as long as me. I wait for 20 minutes then swim back to shore. Extremely slowly as to not attract its attention. Second plane hit the WTC, out my 35th floor office window about half-mile away. The first one happened behind me and I guess I didn't hear it, but then someone called me and I was looking out the window at the smoke and the papers floating everywhere. I still thought it was some small plane accident, and I couldn't see the hole because it was on the other side. I was wondering if it was caught on video and picturing what the crash would look like in my head when the second one hit right in front of me, on the side facing me. It slid in like a coin into a slot, and after a moment a ball of flame shot out in various directions, and a moment after that my window shook. It looked just like I was picturing the first one in my head at that moment, and my mental gears turned for a full 10 seconds wondering how my eyes just showed me what I was picturing. It wasn't until someone ran into my office asking what happened and I heard myself tell them that I realized it. I walked down 35 flights, walked miles home to Brooklyn, watched the second one fall on TV, then found my wife and toddler daughter at a gym class, and immersed myself in my daughter's world where this didn't happen. I watched a man die after a police officer shot him in the head. The guy was having a mental breakdown inside the Tully's Coffee across the street from my apartment. I tuned in when I heard sirens and saw the guy walking out holding a terrified girl by the neck waving around a knife. I watched this standoff for at least 15 minutes before the action was outside my line of sight. Of course I ran down to the street like the rubberneckers I am. I heard the loudest pop as I turned around the corner and saw the guy just fall back on the sidewalk in front of the Rite Aid. His face literally drained of color going from pink to gray right in front of me. I had never seen anyone die before so it really shook me up. Whoever was supposed to clean up the scene did a really crappy job too, and there were spots of brain and blood on the pharmacy door, and I thought about that guy every time I passed it. So, this story might sound like bullshit to some, but I swear it happened.